Have you ever given general advice, made a statement about probability, or said something like, "Don't sleep with a man on the first date," and somebody immediately jumps in with, "Speak for yourself," or "Not me," and then follows it up with, "I did that, and we got married," and now you're sitting there wondering why they were so quick and so loud to prove you wrong? Because it almost feels like you struck a nerve when all you did was make a general statement. But that moment reveals something deeper about how people think. On the surface, it looks like disagreement, like they're just offering a different perspective. But if you pay attention, they're not actually arguing your point. They're defending their experience. You're talking about probability, what tends to happen across many situations, but they're responding with possibility, what happened in their one situation. And when those two get mixed together, it creates tension. Because your statement doesn't just land as information, it lands as implication. They hear, "If this usually doesn't work, then what does that say about what I did?" And instead of sitting with that question, they respond immediately to separate themselves from it. That's why it's quick, and that's why it's loud. Because it's not just a response, it's a reflex. A reflex to say, "That doesn't apply to me, speak for yourself, that's not my experience." And just like that, the conversation shifts. Now it's no longer about the pattern, it's about them proving they don't belong to it. And here's where it gets even deeper. People don't naturally think in probabilities, we think in extremes. All or nothing, always or never. So when you say this usually leads to a certain outcome, they hear, "This never works." And once it sounds like an absolute, it becomes easy to challenge. All they have to do is say, "Well, it worked for me," or even shorter, "Speak for yourself." 3 words that don't actually address the point, but completely shift the conversation. Because now it's no longer about patterns or likelihood, it's about your experience versus theirs. And underneath all of that is something most people don't realize. Advice doesn't just inform people, it touches identity. Because sometimes advice implies you didn't have full control over the outcome, and people don't like that. They don't like the idea that timing, luck, or probability played a role in their success. So instead of saying, "That worked for me, but I can see the risk," they double down. "No, that's you. Speak for yourself." Because that allows them to hold on to one powerful belief. I am the reason this worked. And that connects to something else. People love the idea of breaking the rules and still winning, because it feels powerful. Following the rules and succeeding feels normal, expected. Breaking the rules and still winning feels like proof that you're different, that you don't need guidance, that you create your own outcomes. It turns your story into something special. I did everything they said not to do, and I still came out on top. But here's the part that makes people pause. Breaking the rule and winning doesn't always mean you were right. Sometimes it just means you were lucky. And that's uncomfortable, because if you admit that, you also have to admit it could have gone differently. And people don't like sitting with that. So instead, they rewrite the story. They turn probability into certainty, chance into choice, luck into strategy. But the truth is this: there are patterns in life. There are behaviors that increase your chances of certain outcomes. And there are also exceptions. Both can exist at the same time. But confusing the two is where people get lost. A more grounded perspective sounds like this: yes, it worked for me, but that doesn't mean it works for everyone. That kind of thinking requires something most people struggle with: humility, the ability to separate your personal story from a general truth. So the next time someone says, "Speak for yourself," understand what you're really hearing. You're not just hearing disagreement. You're hearing someone creating distance between themselves and a pattern they don't want to be part of. And the real question becomes, can you recognize the difference between what can happen and what usually happens? Because just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean it cannot happen to others. And an individual anecdote reflects a single experience, not the broader pattern.